With the kit now unboxed, if you want to see that video, it is on my channel. I will be leaving links down below if you want to check it out. I could move on to preparing the body for primer. Now, as I've said during the unboxing, the panel lines are pretty good, but not very deep. So every single one needed a lot of attention, getting them a lot deeper and a lot more pronounced, so to speak, because if I didn't touch them at all after sanding, priming, painting, they would pretty much all be flooded with paint and totally disappeared. Now, since I want to have them nice and deep so I can mask them off for all the sections that need masking, and I also want them nice and deep for a bit of a 3D effect and giving them a bit more depth, I of course need to scribe all of them out. And that is done in this case with a Display 0.2 scribing blade and their handle. I will be leaving links to those in the description down below as well. After what felt like 3 days of scribing, I could move on to sanding the entire body down with a 600 grit in order to get it nice and smooth and also scuffed up for the primer and paint to stick to it very nicely. First off, I'm going to blow over it with some air to remove any loose or remaining dust, and then I'm going to move on to applying a couple coats of primer on the hard to reach, easy to forget spots, and of course the main body itself will follow soon after. I built up the primer in about 3 light coats until I was fully satisfied with the coverage, let that cure for a little bit, sanded out very minor dust specks and imperfections here and there with a 3000 grit, and could then move on to applying a silver base coat for the yellow to go on top of later on. With 2 coats of silver now applied, I let that cure for a little while and then started shaking up the yellow. I decided to go for a Lamborghini yellow and specifically a pearl yellow. Now, this car was offered in a variety of awesome colors. Of course, championship white, the black, all super neat options, but the black and the white are a bit standard, and I've just finished a red car, so I don't want to keep doing red cars. And other colors didn't really suit my fancy or are colors that I've recently done, so I figured why not go bold and go for a bright yellow. I think it looks extremely cool on this car, but I wanted to give it a bit of a twist, and that is why I went with the Lamborghini yellow. It is a 2-stage paint, just a flat yellow first and then a pearl top coat on top for a nice flip-flop and a pearly glossy effect. The yellow that I'm using is covering really nicely. This is just the first coat. I let that cure for a bit and then moved on to the second coat. Now, the second coat, again, very nice coverage, as the first one pretty much completed it already. But to be sure, after the second coat was applied, I let it cure again for about 10 to 15 minutes and moved on to the third and final base coat of yellow before moving over to the pearl coat. The pearl that is included in this kit is also a bit of a transparent yellow with a nice pearl mixed into it, and that goes just straight on top of the yellow that I've laid down underneath already, and it still does show the yellow through, but it makes it a lot more metallic and pearly and gives it a nice flip. Specifically when the light hits it, it is a really cool, neat effect. But during the painting stage you can't really see it all that much, as it basically is a transparent coat, and it hides pretty well unless you have specific lights on top of it. Now, I then set all of this painted stuff aside for about 24 hours, and the next day I could move back onto it, masking it off in order for all of the black that needs to be painted. And boy, is there a lot of black that needs to be painted on this one. Now, there's a lot of different special editions, tuners, etc. that brought out versions of this car in real life, and Honda also did a couple versions themselves, and I just decided to go for a mix between all of the versions and specifically choosing the parts and options that I like. Now, I'm pretty sure that this was a factory Honda option with a black roof and a black scoop, so I decided to do that as well. The black scoop just breaks it up nicely and gives a nice aggressive look to the already pretty aggressive hood, but instead of hiding it in the same color, it just makes it very clear and plain in sight. The roof was also painted in a couple coats of black. I let that cure for a bit, could then move on to masking or unmasking it, and then masking it again for the second stage of black parts. So the first section of black parts has now been completed. It is remasked again for the other parts to be painted black, and this is going to be repeated a couple more times. Now I could have just very carefully masked off all of the parts on the body, very meticulously, taking my time or making sure not to overlap anything, etc. But I personally just like tackling smaller areas at a time so that I don't accidentally skip on some masking, have holes in the masking, etc. and then ruin it all. So instead I just tackle a small area at a time, like I said, then let that cure and move on to the next section, and not having to mask off the entire body and making sure everything is done right. I just have a small section to focus on instead. With most of the bigger sections now completed, I could put my focus to some smaller sections on the front fenders. These sort of vents, on some they are painted body color, on some they are painted black. I kind of like the look of both, but in the end, for a more aggressive look and to break up the yellow a bit, I decided just to paint them black. Now on the rear bumper there was also a section that needed to be painted black, so that was masked off, painted, unmasked, and then I can move on to applying some decals. Now there are still many more black parts that need to be painted, however those do not need to be gloss black, those need to be flat or semi-gloss black. So first of all I focused on all of the areas that need to be gloss black, and those have been painted now, and I'm applying a clear coat on top of them to make it gloss and also just blend in with the rest of the glossy clear coat on the body. And then after that cures in a couple of days, I can move on to masking it again, but then focusing on a flat or semi-gloss black for the other areas to give it the look that they need. The 2K clear that I'm using here is from number 5 and available in my web shop, TheScalemodelingChannel.com. Now it is actually the first time that I've used it, and I've really liked it so far. It does cover really nicely, and according to the instructions you do not need to add thinners, but I found out after the first coat it was a little bit too thick, so I added about 10% of thinners to the mixture for the second coat, and that made it flow out a lot nicer, a lot smoother, and it also finished off the clear coat really nicely in just about 2 coats. While you're watching me apply the final coat of clear, I want to thank my patrons and channel members for supporting the channel. If you want to help out, feel free to click the link down below and make a small donation to the channel. So after finishing off this second coat, I'm just going to leave the clear coat to dry for a couple of days. It does have some small dust nibs here and there. Overall, not too bad, and a really nice smooth finish. In the meantime, I will put my attention to the interior and the chassis, and then move back to the body after all of those parts have finished and the body and clear coat have cured properly. That's it for this one. See you guys next time.